Here on WHIP right now, Tim Saunders, Flyers radio play-by-play, is kind enough to give us a few minutes of his time. Tim, how are you?
Boys, what's going on?
Not too much. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. Now, let's just dive right into it. Flyers are down 2-0. You heard us talking about it a little bit. There's the physical aspect. There's the talent aspect. But one thing that's been steady for the Flyers, for the most part, yes, there was the goal he gave up from farther than mid-ice, but Steve Mason has been just fantastic for these guys over the last stretch. Do you think there's any more he can do to keep this team in this series?
Well, no. Let's face it, he's been the best Flyer throughout the series. And you're right, going back the last couple of months, he's the biggest reason that they're in the playoffs to begin with. So, certainly his teammates are putting that the one goal Saturday behind them quickly. They're not making an issue of it. It hasn't affected their confidence in him, and they fully expect Steve Mason to go right back to what he's been doing really for the last couple of months.
Yeah, he's been tremendous for the past couple of months, and he's really setting a standard and showing the way you should be playing. Now, the team itself, something's not clicking, and I spoke with Scoop Cooper over the weekend, and he said, this team has basically been playing playoff hockey for the past 20 games or so because they've been fighting for their 8th seed lives, and they're perhaps gassed. And on the other hand, this Caps team really hasn't had much of a challenge because they've been in the playoffs since basically forever. But do you see a fatigue factor with this team right now, the Flyers?
Well, I think it's a fair point because you're right. They've been in the playoffs for well over a month. So they've been playing meaningful games, and the Washington Capitals, up until Game 1, really haven't for a long time. At this time of the year, everybody's fatigued, everybody's banged up and bruised, and you manage your energy as best you can. To be honest with you, I don't think the Capitals have been overly physical or that much more physical than the Flyers have been. They've just been more effective. And let's face it, the whole difference in the series right now, we'd be talking a lot differently if the Flyers had been able to score in the power play. They're 0-for-8 in the power play. Washington 3-for-8, and it's as simple as that.
It is as simple as that. And I think that's one of the most staggering telltale signs, the writing on the wall of the series. It's just the Flyers' inability to get work done on the power play. And losing Couturier is major for that. But before we get to Couturier, I want to you mentioned the fatigue and everybody's beat up and battered. Jacob Voracek, maybe it's his foot that's bothering him, but he just isn't Voracek right now. What do you think? What does he have to do to get better on the ice out there, in your opinion?
Well, it's the million-dollar question, and I'm not sure Jake or anybody else really knows the answer to that. He has not been the same player since returning from the injury, and he was quick to say it's really not so much the legs as it is his hands and his inability to make plays at the level that he had been before he got hurt. I will say I thought he was moving better in Game 2 on Saturday, and hopefully that's an encouraging sign, but especially without Sean Couturier in the lineup, they need Jake Voracek being Jake Voracek if they're going to win this series.
Now, again, we're talking to Tim Saunders, play-by-play announcer for the Philadelphia Flyers. Tim, you mentioned Sean Couturier, and obviously that's a huge loss. But you saw a lot of action from some different players here and there on the lines and everything, predominantly Scott Lawton. Who do you think, obviously Voracek, and you want to see your main stars step up, but who do you think out of these lesser-known guys will be able to step up or should step up in this series to ultimately help the Flyers get back into it?
Well, let's be clear. As it relates to Couturier, it's not going to be one guy. There's an old adage in all of sports, but especially hockey, is you talk about the guys that are there, and you don't worry about the guys that aren't because you can't do anything about it. But having said that, the loss of Sean Couturier, you've lost your best defensive forward, a big body that can defend guys like Ovechkin and Kuznetsov. So clearly that's about as indispensable a player the Flyers could lose. But it's going to have to be everybody. Scott Lawton obviously has stepped up. I thought he played really well at 5 shots in Game 2, so I think he can bring something and certainly fresh legs to the lineup. But it's everybody, and it's a matter of staying within the confines of Dave Hackstall's system. Straight ahead, chip pucks in, to spots you can go get it, and forget the creative east-west playmaking that lead to turnovers, because against this team, you turn the puck over, and it's going to kill you.
Yeah, it's definitely going to kill you. And you mentioned Ovechkin and Backstrom among the likes, and just we knew going in that this was going to be it was going to be a tough series. It is going to be a tough series, rather. It's going to be an uphill battle. But with that in mind, you've seen Ovechkin and Backstrom play for some time now, and if you're a head coach and you've got those two guys on your top line, you've got to be a happy man. And on top of that, they've got TJ Oshie. What are your impressions of how well and just mechanical and clinical and how this Capitals team has been so far in these playoffs?
Well, the biggest difference in the Caps, frankly, is one, their coaching staff, and Barry Trotz has brought in a defensive mindset, has gotten offensive players to understand that you have to play good two-way hockey to be successful in the playoffs. And the Caps, and specifically Alexander Ovechkin, didn't get that for a number of years. But some of the moves they made in the offseason actually went from being big and slower to a little bit more skill and quicker. And I think the pieces that they've surrounded Ovechkin with are as good now in Washington as they've ever been. So on paper, this is a team that has all the tools to be able to win a Stanley Cup. But you play the games, and that's why, because anything can happen. And, you know, the old adage is hard work beats skill that doesn't work hard. So if the Capitals have the skill and they don't work hard, then they're ultimately not going to be successful.
Tim, you did mention earlier one of the things that was hampering the Flyers this series was their inability to score on the power play. You've been watching them throughout the year. What, in your opinion, what's going wrong? How are they approaching it in this series, and how should they approach it differently to, try and convert some of these opportunities going forward in the series?
Well, I wouldn't impose myself on the coaching staff because they know a lot more about it than we do. They did make some changes before Game 2, and you saw the difference. They generated scoring chances in the second game way more than they did the first. They still didn't score, but I thought they were more dangerous. They moved some guys around, Voracek, Braden Shen, and I think they'll continue to do that. Obviously, you have to force the Caps to maybe come off the Claude Giroux and Shane Gostisbehere a little bit, because they're smothering those two. Those two are the key to the Flyers' power play, but you got to create room for them, and the way you do that is to move guys around and continually be moving on the power play. You can have a 5-on-4 advantage, but if you're standing still, it's not going to be effective.
Absolutely, and I think that's been, at least from what I've seen, them not really moving or creating an offense is a major problem. Is there a Flyer in this series so far that on offense that has stuck out to you? Because Ryan White stuck out for me.
Well, Whitey is what he is. I mean, he's a good net front presence guy in the second power play, and you always know what you're going to get with Sean White. I think Braden Shen's been very physical in this series, and I think he's at his best when he plays like that. But let's face it, the Flyers have not made life uncomfortable enough for Braden Holtby. Good as he's been, he hasn't had to deal with a whole lot of traffic in front, and I think that's the single thing the Flyers have got to change in these two games at home.
Now, Tim, you mentioned throughout this phone call a bunch of hockey adage? What was the phrase you used? Adages? Like for example.
Whatever. There are a lot of cliches. There are a lot of cliches in hockey.
The point is, hard work. You said hard work beats skill that doesn't work hard, and I really like that. I'm curious, what are your favorite whatevers in hockey? Your favorite cliches, or one of them?
The one that probably applies now is just go play. A lot of this is noise, and a lot of the injuries or they haven't done this. The team has got to focus on just go play, block out all the peripheral stuff, and just show up and play your game. And tonight in Philadelphia, in this building, and there are going to be 6 guys on the ice tonight for the Flyers that have never experienced playoff hockey in this building, in this town. And I'm telling you, it's a different animal. So you got to feed on that energy and that excitement in the right way. And if they can do that, I think they will game 3.
It's 1,000% a different energy in this building. It's really indescribable. You really have to witness it for yourself, that being Flyers Play of Hockey. We're talking with Flyers play-by-play broadcaster Tim Saunders, who's on 97.5 The Fanatic. And Tim, it's going to be an emotional night at the stadium tonight, no doubt. It's going to be a little bit different. The atmosphere will be different. Obviously, the longtime owner, just ambassador, just tremendous person. The man embodied the fan base. Ed Snyder passed away. What are your thoughts, just looking in hindsight, and how much did this guy mean to this organization?
Well, I don't even know if you can measure that, because he's one of the few in any sport that up until Monday morning, he was the one sole constant that started his team from the ground and has been with his club for the last 48, 50 years. He was the prototypical owner, though. He's the kind of owner that I think other teams would like to have, in that his passion was second to no one. Mm-hmm. He was physically present, and he had relationships with individual guys. Every player in that room, and especially the guys that had been here for any length of time, got to know the owner, had a relationship with the owner. That's not always the case in other cities. It was here, and I think that's why he's so revered.
Yeah, and he, again, I spoke with Scoop Cooper over the weekend, and he mentioned that there was a story where Ed Snyder didn't like a call, and he came down from his box in the Spectrum and went right up to the glass, yelled over the glass at the referees, and that just reminded me of Mark Cuban, and that speaks to the 700-level mentality that this guy has, and it's just a shame to see him go. But speaking of Philadelphia sports fans, Ed Snyder wasn't necessarily from Philadelphia at the start. He was born in D.C., but you know that Mr. Snyder fancied himself a nice cheesesteak. Now, I'm just curious, Tim, before we wrap things up here on Stadium Talk with you, what is your go-to cheesesteak in the Philadelphia area?
Oh, I don't know. I probably have gone to gyms more than anything. They are about the worst thing you can eat. So you indulge when you have company in town that have never been to Philadelphia before, and that's about the only time I do.
I know you're a Detroit man, so I wanted to get your outside perspective. Tim, we really appreciate the time here on WHIP. Thanks so much, and good luck tonight.
All right, guys. Keep up the good work.
You too. Take care.
Thanks, Tim.